You good to go? Let's go. Hi, Hima. How are you?
Well, how about yourself?
Very well, thanks. So I always wondered what is the difference between a psychiatrist, a psychologist, a counselor?
So, this is a question that I get a lot, to be honest. And to answer that from a point of access of service, anybody can go to any of these three individuals, professionals, to seek for help. So, what a psychiatrist does, he or she is a trained individual in medicine. So, they have a medical background and they do their MBBS and specialize in psychiatry, and they understand the brain at an anatomical level, and they prescribe medications. Now, what a psychologist does is they are trained in behavioral ways of understanding what is pushing the behavior. Me, for example, I'm trained in psychology, and I'm also trained as a family therapist. So what we do is to understand the person's biopsychosocial model. So that would be the person's biology, their psychology, and the circles around them. So what is triggering them into either sticking with a behavior that is problematic or resisting change. So what a counselor does is it's usually it's a skill, actually, a person who is specialized in field. Is one of the first correspondents when it comes to somebody who's struggling with mental health, or they are better trained at picking up the first signs. If someone's struggling, you may benefit from visiting a psychiatrist or speaking to a therapist. So in school settings, we have more counselors. So they are trained to inform and report, and they do more of sorry, I'm missing the word. Psychoeducational content. So it's more like informing, advising, whereas a therapist wouldn't advise. It's more like, what's going on for you? How do you make sense of what your experience is? What informs you about that? What were your past early life childhood experiences? So it's not more like it's not a ready to go answer that is given, and not to belittle value of what counselors do. They're very skilled in picking up things, and they are skilled to be the first respondents. But the training there is different. In all three, the training is different.
And what about coaches?
Coaches, so
Life coaches, to be very specific.
Life coaches, there are different kinds of coaches. The core thing that they do is align with the client and align on like there are career coaches, there are financial coaches. So there is a specialty in each of that. When you talk about life coaches, it's again not as in depth with counselors, but they still try to provide the kind of support and again advice. That's what I would call it, from their expertise on how to what are coping mechanisms and strategies that they can use to arrive at a goal, say. So SMART goals is something that they usually, it's a CBT technique.
CBT?
CBT is a technique that is taught to psychologists. It's cognitive behavioral therapy,
Okay.
But it's a psychological approach. But some of these techniques are sometimes, and unfortunately, even drawn out of context and used. But I hope I'm not going all over the place.
No, not at all.
It's one CBT one. The CBT technique I was referring to is called SMART goals.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes we even urge life coaches, when you're connecting to a client and you feel like you want to strategize something for them, look at how practical their goals are. So SMART actually stands for SMART.
Specific, measurable,
yes, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound. Yeah. So that's one of the skills that they use. So yeah, that's how I understand life coaches.
Okay. So Hima, you said that the first correspondents are usually the counselors, and then you have the psychologists who are trained with the psychobehavioral?
Cognitive behavioral therapy. So now this is an approach that is most depended on because it has a lot of research backing. So a lot of even psychiatrists who work in connection with psychologists, most of those psychologists are CBT trained. Like my earlier training was in CBT, and then I branched off to family therapy because the sense I got was that a person's social fitting, early life experiences, and the people around them influence and kind of mold the person that they are. So hence that was more of my curiosity than CBT. But to answer your question, CBT is an approach to understand how a person's cognition informs their behavior. Like, for example, what I believe is what will inform the way I behave.
Okay, so you're saying the deep-seated beliefs, or anything.
So they honestly would come with layers, but yes, your core beliefs of perhaps worthiness. Am I worthy to have this relationship? Am I something like that. When a person feels that they are not deserving, and I think Brené Brown has written a lot about this. Not typically CBT, but when it comes to these beliefs, you kind of excavate and see where these beliefs are stemming from. Where did you pick that up? Where did you understand that you're not worthy? Or who even unintentionally gave you that impression? So you go back and you see if it's based on some experience, and then you that's where I come in, like early life experiences, family experiences, and things like that. Right. So yeah, CBT has more to do with constructing or deconstructing or understanding the belief underlying the behavior.
So Hima, we agreed on doing a few topics. So here they are: how we show up as parents, emotions as a resource, and what limits us from change. So can you tell me more about the topics? How we show up as parents. What are we going to talk about over there?
I think all these topics have been really playing on my mind. I mean, the second and third, that's a part of my job. Like I actively explore my clients' emotions, and of course, change is, especially considering post-pandemic, change is something that we've always been married to, and we just got a reminder of how big a plunge it was. But we'll talk a bit more about that in detail. But the one that is closest to my heart now is that how we show up as parents, our internal dialogue, what we often tell ourselves, our internal dialogue.
So in about 30 seconds, what do you think the gist of that is for everyone to understand? What is it about?
We often tell ourselves either things that will help us or probably not help us from showing up as parents, as the kind of guardian, supporter, cheerleader that our kids would want us to have. And what my line of thought would be of what may help that, and what behaviors or what thought patterns may disrupt or be unhelpful for that. Yeah.
Okay. Tell us more. Yeah.
So, is it okay if I ask you a question?
Sure.
Yeah. So, because honestly, that's how my mind keeps rolling.
Of course.
So, perhaps not about yourself, but if you were to think about a parent and they would want to tune in and understand a bit more about how they can show up as better parents, what do you think they'll be having on their mind?
I wouldn't know him. All that I know is they'll be having a lot on their mind, but it'll be very hard to place a finger on one. I mean, at least that's for me, because I always have this. I always think about things that I need to be a good parent. I need to be a good partner. These are the things that are consistently there in my mind, and I always want to know if I'm doing my bit. So at the same time, I have to keep my sanity, and my schedule of work is not is completely different. So when everybody comes home, that's when I go out and work, because I work in shift basis. So those are the things that do get challenging. I would love to spend more time with both my wife and daughter together. I do get time to spend with my daughter during the day, but you see, I miss out on spending time with my wife. So yeah.
Right, as you said in the beginning, you would struggle to put a pinpoint at it, and that really goes to show that not just you, me, lots of parents actually struggle. It is a vast area, and a huge part of that is when we are devoting ourselves, a huge part of ourselves, our best practices to a smaller human being. Where is time for us, right? And that very often, especially in the early years, gets lost in the in that process of nurturing and making home for another human being. But and these are the practical bits, right? No, but what I'm talking about is what a person tells themselves. What are the kind of thought processes that help them to show up? And one of the biggest things that I do want to talk about is self-doubt. Self-doubt, how open you are to receiving help, how perhaps sometimes defeated you feel if you had high expectations of yourself as a parent, especially new mums. I have, like I mentioned, I had a 1-year-old, and just at that point is when I started working with a lot of new mothers. So the kind of that difficulty, those emotions, they're very real, and it happens just at that cusp, when a lot of change is going on, and those are the beautiful years. You live them struggling, you don't really get those beautiful years back, right? I mean, Peterson talks about it quite a bit. That, the first 5, Jordan Peterson. Yeah, so he's the first 5 years are those formative years, and then it's not just your presence, but even for you, they have a huge effect on your quality of life. So being able to being able to show up both for the child and for yourself, because those early memories are a huge part of the family that you create, or your relationship. So I think that's a bit of what I would like to talk about. I think that went on for a bit. Then you wanted a more concise one.
No. This one I want a very detailed one, because like you said, the early years is very essential. There are other things that I want to speak about. You did mention you're a mom as well, and when you were going through certain challenges. Can we talk about mom's guilt? All working moms have this particular thing. So can we go there? Because that's one topic that I'd like to lean on. If that is a part of this, how we show up as parents, as an internal dialogue.
Internal dialogue for moms, but we'd love to explore how it goes for dad as well.
Yes, please. Well. Yes, that's the next one. Yeah.
So mom guilt. I think it's at this point I feel it's a very known term, right? A lot of people, both men and women, parent or non-parent, they know in theory what it's like, but the true nature of what mom guilt. It's from different angles. When you step away from a child where you're the primary caregiver, and you have that connection, you have that yearning back and forth, both for the child and for yourself, to be together, to be in each other's arms. But then there's the reality bit of where certain things are on the line. When 6 months, 8 months, a year, at what point are you supposed to step away and look into your career, be concerned about your future? So that divide between the different roles that you play, if you're a teacher, if you are someone's mentor, if you're a boss, if you are an employee, if you're a team member. So it's not, definitely mom takes precedence. The role of mom takes precedence, but then there are other ones that come in as well. And then when that burden, I'm going to call it burden, yes, when individuals have to pretty much dissect themselves and, pass the pie around, there's always that lacking. unfortunately, we have to kind of invite the reality that, or accept the reality that, you, or maybe see it in a different light or perspective, that you are a part of different roles. And that is perhaps one of the ways that you can get through that difficult phase, because there is that lacking and that void will hurt. So that's how I think about how that phase and how intense it can get at times when you can't be there for your child.
Is it from a professional experience or your personal one that you're speaking?
It's from both, to be honest, because my personal experience will always inform my professional experience, because, and that's a huge part of what we do. Even in our trainings, we as psychologists, we are supposed to work on ourselves first, and then see how that. It's not like your client is talking to a blank wall. It's talking to a person.
Right.
You are a human being. You're not the know-it-all person in the room, and it's a bit scary if you try to pretend to be that way. You are the human. You need to allow the humanness to come through and connect to the person, and I think that is what my clients appreciate as well. My clients, of course, we don't make it about a casual conversation, but then they see how real, how perhaps you understand what that experience is. There are times when you, this is actually one of those professional skills, it's called self-disclosure, just as the name suggests. There are times when you disclose things about yourself when it is useful for the therapeutic process, but not for you. It's not your therapy space, right? Not the therapist's therapy space. So when you feel like it's useful for the client or it makes sense, and you have to have that plan in the back of your mind, you share things or traumas that, or even case studies that you've worked with, and you see how that may give them hope, or perhaps that may inform them. It could even be an example, that could show them a better perspective.
So if I'm getting you right, is this, since you mentioned Brené Brown, she also talks about sharing vulnerability. When it comes to, you feel that the other person can better connect, or maybe share what's troubling them, just to build trust.
Definitely. It's a huge part of rapport, but then again, when it comes to a therapeutic purpose, your primary aim is to make sure that it is a useful thing to share.
Of course.
And vulnerability need not be your entire traumas, right? It can be you being real with the person. You talk, and even that manner of connecting with the person, sharing your emotions. Like, for example, saying that, you know what, Sarah, I have a sense of anger that you went through that. That kid shouldn't have done that to you when you were 6. So it's true, showing your, perhaps not, in this case, perhaps not vulnerability, but your genuine emotion there.
Right.
Because a blank canvas kind of therapist perhaps wouldn't show that, wouldn't say their true feelings. But sometimes they feel that some clients end up feeling that there is someone on their side, or I can speak more, or that the person in front of me is real.
Right.
So perhaps that helps.
Then
I think we deviated a bit.
Yeah, but that's fine. Dad's guilt.
I think this is a huge. There is a lot of void when it comes to understanding the process of a father, and sometimes the cultural expectation and sometimes the true experience of men, they perhaps clash. What I'm expected to do. I'm expected to be there for my wife who's expecting. Once the baby comes, it's a huge confusion. What am I supposed to do in the labor room? What am I supposed to do? So it's very, very unfortunate that I feel a lot of men are not informed on what to expect, on how they can actually be a huge anchor for their women counterparts,
right,
who don't really need much of solution, but just their psychological, emotional presence. I think this is big. That just as we were talking about vulnerability, the fact that they can absorb what is the sense in the room, the tension in the room. I think that is a huge resource when it comes to supporting, building a family. And a lot of new dads, it's very, very natural that they don't always connect. There are a lot of things that happen very systemically, mom's getting worried that the dad is not connecting with the child. I think when you start worrying on that tangent, it perhaps escalates. There are new systems that come in place. Like, there is the distance sort of widens, between dad and child, or dad and wife, husband and wife.
Right.
So because the mom starts to compensate and the dad doesn't have an opportunity to grow his natural feelings sometimes. And there is this, I'm not sure if you've heard of it, maternal gatekeeping. I think it was in that book called Lean In. And it's a popular concept where dads sometimes don't get it right, and moms feel the need to overly lean in, step in, and do it correctly, do things correctly for the child. But what's most important is that dads also need to have an opportunity to make their mistakes. And they learn through that. And dads also have a wonderful, unique way of connecting with their children. Most mums maybe need to allow that to take place and add its space. So both dad and child feel safe enough, and they have their own lingo, their own way of connecting. And mom probably needs to step back a bit. On the other hand, if you step in, you're probably disrupting the possibilities that relationship can have.
All right. How does one overcome that? So there has to be an understanding between mom, dad, and the child.
You're going to like my answer. Faith.
Okay.
Because that whole phase is a huge learning curve. I mean, for the baby to come into the world, for mom to understand what she is doing, what her body is doing, how she's emotionally supposed to react to a crying baby, how she's supposed to keep up emotionally with her body that's changing. And for dad as well, because a lot of, again, what culture has dictated has changed a lot over the past 50 years. And allowing that time, allowing mistakes to come up, allowing yourself to make mistakes. And this is a huge part of the internal dialogue. Are you okay with falling from those high benchmarks that you set out for yourself? And to show up as parents again. So if you make a mistake, if you raise your voice at a child who's not listening, but that was a no-go for you, say 4 years ago, before you even had a child, what is the immediate thing that you tell yourself? Do you beat yourself up? How do you find that what is your process of emotional regulation? A huge part of it is actually taking time for yourself to de-escalate, finding time for yourself, and allowing dad allowing mom to do it, mom allowing dad to do it, and respecting that this is an important part of allowing, making that learning curve not to be too steep. So allowing time for each other.
What about the ones who are not aware of such processes or such kind of information?
Thankfully, there are lots of medium out there for people, who are not aware. If they have the tiniest bit of curiosity, there's a lot of information that can actually readily go to them. There are so many parenting programs that you don't even have to pay for. I mean, you have one-to-one sessions, even in Dubai, but you have so many videos on YouTube, and information is available from not just, actually from both professionals and lots of parents who are, first-time moms and dads. So what I would perhaps wish that any new parent would want is a bit of curiosity on how they can tune themselves towards their child. And that little bit of curiosity will go a long way. And for those who may not have that curiosity, there is that risk of rupture in the relationship in the long term.
Right.
So it's that attunement towards your child, and it doesn't need to be. It's not like one size fits all. Every advice never wouldn't always work for every child, right? I mean, so it's important that you're available, emotionally available, and you listen. And the first thing that comes to your mind is this safe? Is it safe enough to do what she is expecting me to do? And if not, how can I put that boundary kindly, but at the same time make sure that she or he grows in a way that is, without hindrance, but with me by her side.
Something that I wanted to ask you is, when is it too late? Because you said that over a long period of time, the relationship ruptures. So when is it too late?
Lovely question. Never.
Okay.
Really, even if it's after a rupture, I have mums and, daughters coming in, dads bringing their daughters in. Even when your child is in there, much later on in life, if you feel you suddenly have that curiosity, there's always a possibility, as long as your child is open to still having those conversations. So, yeah, it's always a possibility. The only downside is that perhaps many years would have passed by with that rupture, and you not having known that there is a rupture. Yeah.
Emotions as a resource.
One of the most precious yet underrated things that we have is our internal system actually telling us or guiding us what to do. Now, I can imagine that this might sound a bit hokey-pokey, but it's actually understanding where your emotions are coming from and how they actually, each emotion that you experience actually pushes you to do something. Like, for example, anger. And I think one of the first things that we need to understand is that a lot of people like to dissect or segregate emotions as good emotions and bad emotions. And that's a bit unfortunate, because we lose that entire perspective that each emotion is actually pushing you, in primitive terms, survive. Anger is pushing you to go forward and do something, either put a boundary with somebody who's overstepping it, or pushing you to fight back. Tears, emotions, it's like the soul trying to ventilate. So the whole act of crying actually has a relieving effect on a body that's grieving. So each emotion that you experience, whether difficult or let's call it joyful, they all serve a purpose to help your functioning. So that's the bit as the gist, emotions they all serve a purpose. And even when we see emotions in others, we always want to, either have difficulty in responding to someone else's emotions or working through our own emotions. Far too many people actually suppress them, and I would consider that as wasting one of those useful resources that you have.
Have you seen the movie Inside Out?
I have.
That's also about emotions, isn't it?
It is. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to see right through till the end, but I intend to. Okay. But I must have seen it in college, I'm sure, but my memory, it escapes me. But it's where the little ones are in the little girls'
constant conversations amongst them, and I had a very different kind of thought process when I was watching the movie, and then in the end, which I'm not going to tell you the spoiler, it really changed the way I saw things.
Yes, so, it's how one takes over and the other is. I briefly remember, and I remember Inside Out is a very popular, medium, a wonderful art actually, where a lot of people got the point in some sense. So they started seeing emotions and how right from the time when it's a baby, and then new emotions keep popping up of sorts. And then one thing actually that I personally use a lot in my sessions when I work with children or when I work with adults, we have something called the Wheel of Emotions. It's a PDF that you can freely access on the websites.
There are lots of emotions.
Tons. You would actually be surprised. When you see that wheel on the first look, it's quite overwhelming because, it's concentric circles. And then you have the middle one, which is the basic. And then each pie of those are like sort of, they go into furthermore. And
I did not know I had so many. And you know what? Sorry, I'm breaking your thought process, but
no, I'm like, yeah.
I've seen it. I'm not really certain if you're talking about the same one, but the amount of emotions I've seen, I can't, for the life of me, pinpoint what exact type that I'm feeling at the moment unless I take a deep dive. So even how we show up as parents, the dialogue within. I know I'm going back to the topic, and that's the same thing as emotions as well. I got to be honest, I don't have that much time to self-reflect because I think self-awareness is key to understanding this. And what's the point in me communicating to my partner or to my child if I myself don't know where I stand?
If somebody were to give you some options of words, would you be able to connect with those words?
When it comes to finding out the emotion,
Identifying your emotion. Would you be able to say, I'm feeling guilty or depressed or like, so especially when I work with men, this is the thing. And there's a lot of research to back this up, right? So when I work with men, how do you feel? It's either I'm okay, I'm fine, or it's fine, but these words, usually you let it go, you let it slide. But when this becomes a habit, you actually explore what is okay. Is it I'm struggling, I'm burnt out, and these are also options. So you really try to tap in. So when it comes to men, they of the three concentric circles, they use words that's from the center, which are what children use. But when you ask a lady that, even without looking at the wheel, they'll pick the ones outside.
right?
And I don't want to be gender like stereotypical, but most often that's what I've seen. Knowing to identify emotions not only helps you, you're standing up, you're voicing out, you're sharing. It also helps the communication process between you and your partner. Your wife or your husband gets to know what exactly you're feeling. Like, for example, I was working with another client where the wife kept saying, I'm feeling sad. And the husband just didn't understand what like, in fact, it would annoy him. It would become a trigger point when it's quite unfortunate when you want empathy, but that becomes like a reason for a person to lead away even more. But I didn't realize the power of this tool, and I swear I use it a lot more. It's very simple and very basic, and I use it a lot more than many of the other measurements. But she saw this, and she actually started using words that were a little more descriptive. And she said, guilt. I feel guilt. And that almost immediately brought back in the husband, because he's familiar with that feeling. He knows in his own sense how powerful that feeling can get, and immediately connected with what the struggle was. So you see, when you're able to identify the feeling within yourself and share it, it fills a huge void when it comes to you living in coexistence with things around you, people around you.
Right.
So I for those who struggle with managing emotions, or there are a lot of words that are thrown about, really: emotional regulation, emotional intelligence. So it comes to, if you will allow yourself time to sit with difficult feelings, it really does come to that. And if you can give yourself feeling, will you actually take the time to inform you, allow it to inform you in a constructive way, than going down the spiral or ruminating? How will you allow that process?
That's the question. How will we allow that process? Because this is just for the sake of argument, Hima. It's not necessarily my take. Okay. When someone has something that's bothering them, they wouldn't want to go there. They wouldn't want to go into the darkness and find a way out. They would rather stay away from that place. I know I know by doing this, what's happening is you're not solving any problem. You're just pushing it away, or you're just bottling it up, or probably even building it and having a lot more other things take place because of bottling that feeling and not exploring what exactly is. But sometimes it's far easier. And I'm talking about the me a few years ago. You had no idea. I would never want to go to that place. Not anymore. I try. I'm not saying I come out successfully out of that. I still try, and it's a long process. But I'm not afraid to getting there again. But there are, it's and let me give you an analogy. It's like this. I would not go to the doctor because he's going to tell me not to play football because I injured my leg. So that's, for me, that's the thing. I don't want to go to the doctor because it might be this. So let's not go to the doctor. It's like the ostrich policy. There's danger. Let's stick our head under the sand and hope everything goes all well. It's very difficult to face what we don't like. It's very difficult to go through that conversation. It's like reliving. It's like a trigger. Maybe in there's certain things that happened, and you've moved on. Not moved on per se. You've moved on without what's the word? Moved on without closure, or just escaped, I would say, from that situation. You wouldn't want to go back and confront it. So why would anyone want to do that?
I love this question, to be honest, because avoidance becomes a coping mechanism. It's like your best coping mechanism. It's like you are in control. Why would I want to pass on something that I'm in control, that's keeping me secure? But again, at the end of the day, that's what it is, a coping mechanism. And as you rightly put, and I love the example that you put, I'm not going to the doctor because I know what's going to be prescribed. You have an inkling of what's in there. But this is what I come to. Is the threat real? Is that dire feeling of confrontation, of shame, of vulnerability, is it really that threatening? And you will never really get to know, you will not get to know the depths of your weaknesses, perhaps, unless you go there. And it takes a huge amount of courage. No one's going to question that. I am going to share this, though. For some it's easy, for some it's not. And that spectrum exists because of some of those beliefs. For example, a person who wants to dive at the deep end of the pool, it's also, I mean, it's the same depth, perhaps, for two people who's diving in. It's the same, but the way they perceive it might be different. There is this very interesting theory called threat versus challenge. When a stress comes up, a person who has an internal locus of control, meaning he or she believes in their capacities more than what is scary out there, they will tend to see it as an opportunity, the stress. For those who have an external locus of control, saying that the wind was too fast, or it was a rainy day, or I don't have luck. This is called external locus of control.
External what?
Locus of control.
Okay.
So when they have an external locus of control, they count on external factors. They credit external factors far more than their own self-belief of what they are capable of. It's not that it doesn't exist. They just see that far more. And it's like, driving in the fog. You kind of place your bets on how well you're driving. You're not using your phone, you're paying attention, your headlights are on, you're in your track, you're trying your best to be in your track. But the other person might be like, oh no, my tires are going to break, or my brake is going to stop working. So if you could have a little bit of faith in what your learning curve towards conquering that weakness, not to sound dramatic, but if you go there once, then you perhaps will learn that it's not as scary. It's not as, shame is okay. Vulnerability, not in front of others, perhaps to yourself, is okay. And the true cost is on people around them than the same person. There is this wonderful book called Attached, which talks about how there are different attachment styles, where a person has either an avoidant or an anxious attachment style, or an anxious avoidant attachment style. Lots of attachment theories that are there, but how people show up in relationships when they have opposing attachment styles, and how that vulnerability cycle sort of becomes like a catch-22, where one fuels the other. The more one wants one to stay, the more the other will want to go away. So it's if you can face inward what is carrying you, perhaps you will have a different relationship with growth, learning, and self-awareness.
So Hima, I'm going to ask you, with all of this information, how or what limits us from change, and what support can the person get? Because you said an individual who's avoiding, it has an impact in and around his or her circle. So not necessarily entirely on that individual, but people around. What kind of support can they give in order for this person to take the first step towards a change, and what limits us from that change?
Just to backtrack a few lines, it's not that the person who avoids does not experience a consequence. It's possible that they keep avoiding the consequence as well.
Okay.
And there are different avenues for coping mechanisms. For some, it is even substance in worst case scenario.
Right.
So you don't realize that it's affecting you, and that again is a true cost as well.
Right.
But what limits us from change? Lots of things for sure. It's the firm belief that perhaps you understand the world and that's it. You have understood the world. So perhaps a lack of curiosity might limit growth again. Also the fear, like I mentioned before. Fear is one of the aspects that, a person thinks about first. But it could be a bit more deeper than that. It's definitely how a person would perceive that change. Is it too scary? Do they have the capacities to match that fear? And when we talk about change, especially post-pandemic, a lot of people, and it's one of those fancy words now, resilience. Everyone wants to talk about resilience, learn resilience. What we need to understand that it's resilience is not that nothing happens to you. It's like the shock absorber of a car. Something happens, but it manages to sustain you. You pick yourself up. And how one builds resilience is like resilience training. You have to actually push your boundary. You put yourself in a difficult spot, not like jumping into the deep end of the pool, but you go deeper successively in increased, you pick up the next week weight.
So increased challenge.
So it's putting yourself at that point. If you're not ready, perhaps for going to put yourself in that difficult position, which needs you to change what existing muscle you have, then perhaps that learning that skill might be lost. And it is a very, very vital skill, because change is the only thing that's constant. Not, to say that cliche term, you are going through change whether you recognize it or not. And perhaps you will come to a point where coping becomes very, very difficult if that muscle of resilience isn't there. And you either resort to avoidance or substance use or different ways of coping which are perhaps maladaptive. They don't really help you to survive or pick yourself up after a fall. So these are some things that I believe limit us from change along with others.
Okay, so if a person needs help in order to be a better parent, with the internal dialogue, to someone to guide, not just a person but the family needs help, or to know how to manage their emotions, know what their emotions are, and also to try and make a change for the better, they can always approach you.
Oh, definitely. And I truly believe that every person is capable of self-directed change. What I am is a partner in that journey, and I become a voice and try to provide a safe space where they can venture into these depths where your own experience of shame and vulnerability is first addressed. And I think that is key. The relationship that I share with my client is what will help us go down that path of difficulty, introspection, and ultimately result in self-awareness.
So, Hima, you said you're going to be a partner in that journey. So, tell us a bit more about you. How's your journey been? How have you chosen this profession?
As a child, to be honest, I mean, back then we wouldn't know that this is what it's called. But I remember being a teenager myself and realizing that I did want to work with children of that age, teenagers. But then as I grew up, I went into different interests, like music was something that I was interested in. I mean, not as a discipline, like I didn't pick it up, but I thought that would be where my career would be. Design. I ended up in architecture, and then eventually I believe it was a teacher who we had a combination of courses, and then psychology was a paper, and then I started learning more, and then I read up Bateson, which is a family therapy author, researcher actually. So I started becoming more and more interested in that science of mind, body, behavior, the connection, what connects all of this, and yeah, that's how I ended up picking that path. And of course, once I picked that, I realized there's more and more and more branches. So I just followed my curiosity, to be honest. So I trained in India, and I trained in an oncology setting where my training was psycho-oncology. And at the same time, I was training here in Dubai in a psychiatric setting, Al Amal Hospital. I was flying back and forth to India and Dubai with my training. We have internships and things like that.
Right.
I got licensed here in Dubai, and I was practicing with the clinic I am in now. I was there for 2 years, and then I trained. I went to London and did another program, training in systemic psychotherapy. So it's an approach for working specialized with families. So I was at King's College London, so I trained with them, and then I was with the NHS for a bit, and then I returned back to the same clinic I was with before, because that clinic is very, very close to my heart.
Okay.
And I've been with them ever since.
Which clinic is this?
This is HRIC Dubai.
Okay.
And that is Human Relations Institutes and Clinics in Dubai.
Okay.
We are a clinic based in JLT.
Brilliant. For anyone who needs more information, I'm going to put that in the description.
Thank you.
And plus, if anyone wants to reach out to you, which is the best way? Is it the LinkedIn or?
I'm on Instagram, and I'm on in LinkedIn as well. And my email ID can be put, clinic email ID can be put on the description. But